Live. Teresa, whilst everyone has started to dial in on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, where are you today, please, Teresa?
I'm in my office on our farm.
And whereabouts in the beautiful English countryside is your farm, please?
In the Garden of Kent, near Tunbridge. So we're a small village called Matfield, where my husband has lived literally half a mile from where he was born and brought up. So he hasn't moved very far, and we've lived here for now over 50 years.
And Teresa, what were we saying in our green room? I'm just going to date this. I don't normally, but Monday the 21st of February 2022, for all of our international viewers, it's a bit windy in the UK. Teresa, what are we on now? We're on our second or third storm in as many days, and we're getting blown. I'm expecting to look outside of my office window and see a trampoline going by, followed by a horse cart or a lorry or something. Is it still windy with you down in Kent today?
It's windy, but it's not as windy as it was on Friday, which was quite frightening. And of course, we and most of the village lost our electricity on, off, and they lost it on Saturday for 12 hours.
Good grief.
Tough on people. But
come on, Teresa, this isn't a proper storm, is it? Because you and I remember October the 16th, 1987, the storm of all storms. And again, those of a younger generation won't know how cataclysmic that storm was, or our international viewers. And just to give a bit of background, it was our early autumn, and the trees were still in full leaf. And Teresa, I think it was quite wet, wasn't it? So all the trees, they just acted like sails, and this huge hurricane came in, thank the Lord, in the middle of the night, so no one was actually about on the road. But the devastation that it created. Teresa, where were you on that night of October the 16th, 1987, in the great UK storm?
Well, I remember it really well. We were actually in our barn down on the other farm, and we lost tiles. And my husband thought he'd go out and have a look, which was probably the stupidest thing he could do. But the next morning, it was devastation. And I don't think the rest of the country realised how bad it was. We lost 1,500 trees. Which is actually not a lot, but they were young orchards, they were pulled over, but we actually couldn't get out. So as we lost electricity and I had to work in London, in the end, I managed to decamp after 2 or 3 days and go and live at the Farmers Club, because we had no electricity for 10 days. But everybody in the village helped each other. You know, they were eating well. They opened their freezers, and we were having pheasants and all sorts of things for those who'd got gas cookers. But people didn't realise that all along the south coast, Sevenoaks lost 6 of its Sevenoaks.
Well, you stole my thought, because I was doing my pre-college year before I went to Harper on a dairy farm near Sevenoaks. And Sevenoaks, everyone was called Sevenoaks because it had these 7 magnificent trees, and they went down to 2 overnight. And the dairy farm I was on, we had no power. We lost a number of the sheds, and we had something like 80 cows that we then had to milk by hand for the next 10 days because we had no power, couldn't get the generators in. It was a fascinating time, Teresa, wasn't it? There was a real community spirit that came about that day.
Yes, there was a sort of spirit, I imagine, must have been going on in the war, because everybody checked, are you all right? And because the places we simply couldn't get through, people had to walk around or bicycle. And they really did help each other. But it took 2 days for the government and everybody to wake up that we needed the army, we needed real help, because it was just the southeast corner, you know.
Yeah. But in the meantime, who looked to help everyone? It was the farming community. Because
absolutely,
it was only farmers who had tractors or low loaders or chainsaws to help everyone out. But Teresa, hopefully we won't have that occur with this third storm that we've got coming in through the UK. But we best stay indoors whilst we have our chat, shall we?
Right, good idea.
And Teresa, what I wanted to do was that the reason that we requested Teresa come on is that I saw Teresa in action at the National Fruit Show. And I was down there, being very kindly requested by Teresa and Sarah Calcott to do a number of live interviews. And unfortunately, I couldn't get to Teresa because she was so busy talking to the politicians of the day that were there, and also looking after all the exhibitors. So we thought, well, let's get Teresa on and have a proper conversation with her, because there's so much that we can learn from her. So, especially for those on the podcast, let's just give a bit of background on Teresa. Teresa Wickham, produce doyenne and retail phenomenon, is the archetypal pioneer. In 1979, she declared war on French apples and co-founded the Women's Farming Union, which ran a successful campaign to revitalise the UK fruit industry. By 1990, she was the first woman divisional director of UK retailer Safeway, where she developed the Strathclyde Food Project, bringing together farmers, growers, manufacturers and retailers to close the UK's trade gap, and later became an advisor to the Sainsbury's board on their 1 billion corporate responsibility programme. Since then, she's held numerous roles managing and developing areas of business, primarily in food, agribusiness and the retail industry. Also is a governor of the Royal Agricultural College / University, chairman of the Oxford Farming Conference and non-exec of New Covent Garden Market Authority, all culminating in the Woman of the Decade in Food, Farming and Innovation accolade, awarded in India by the Women's Economic Forum in 2018. Today, although no longer consulting and into her 70s, I don't believe this, she continues to energize and influence the industry as president of the National Fruit Show and as a regular broadcaster for the BBC on retail and consumer issues. And Teresa, I love this statement. My focus, says Teresa, is to help the next generation. I don't think you ever retire in this industry. You just do what you want to do rather than what you have to do. My job now is opening doors for people. And just having a quick catch up with Teresa in a little green room, some of the people that she's just mentioned to me that could help us has already stunned me. But Teresa, was that a good summary of your career to date?
Yes, it was. It wasn't an intentional career. I got married, very young, and thought that's it. Red Arga, 4 children, and working on the farm. And of course, financially, we needed to do more than just, we needed another income. And also the industry was not having a happy time because we'd just gone into the common market. So these things have flowed from that, but without any planned career or massively good education. I didn't go to university, I didn't get A levels, so none of that. So it's really, I was lucky with the people that I worked with.
Okay, and I have to ask you the personal question. How did you meet your husband?
Oh, well, through his sister, who was at Secretariat College with a great friend of mine. And the great friend came down to stay with his sister, living near Tunbridge Wells. My family were in Tunbridge Wells at the time, but I'd never known the village. So it was his sister who introduced me to her brother.
Okay, and was it love at first sight, or did you think a farmer? Why would I go anywhere near a farmer?
Oh no, he was a very smooth man. He still is, and we were engaged within a year. So you know when you've got the right thing to do. And funnily enough, I was only 21 at the time when I got married, and people did get married younger then, particularly in the farming industry, because you got in and you got on with it.
Yeah, but. How do I word this? You could have just been the archetypal farmer's wife and done everything to keep the farming lifestyle going, but you didn't. You went off, and as I said in our preamble, you were the pioneer. What is it about you? What's the magic dust that's created this vision and this direction and this career objective that you've looked to create for yourself?
Well, my husband was working for his father, so he was the farm manager and I was his wife, and we thought that we might end up in our 50s probably running the farm with everybody else from the family wanting a share. So we thought we'd got to do something for ourselves. And culminating at the same time, the apple industry was in dire straits. And I got together with the 2 other girls, Margaret and Anne, to start the Women's Farming Union. And because we were all so different, that was the spur that got on. We were going to fight for our livelihood and our children's future.
Okay, and was that an easy journey, or did you meet resistance?
It was an interesting journey. Considering how young we were and how different we were, we didn't realize the waves we were creating at the time, because we were absolutely focused on the fact that the French were determined to drive our industry out and we weren't going to have it. So if you've got 3 different people and 3 different brains all focused on the right thing, you learn a lot from each other. And of course, we were helped by Peter Walker, the Ministry of Agriculture, who saw us as a weapon he could use, totally uncontrolled. we were helped by some very good people behind the scenes who gave us some information which we used in the public and was quoted in the Selborne report. So it gave us credibility. It wasn't just women shouting.
So, but Teresa, just got to just pull you up on something. Are you adamant that the French actually wanted to destroy the UK fruit sector? The UK.
Yes, but two things had happened. The English apple industry and part, in fact, of the farming industry had not realised the impact on our market when we joined the common market, what would happen. And the second thing they hadn't realised was how the supermarkets were growing. And, you know, we were supplying stuff on the home market which wasn't really fit for quality in some areas, whereas a buyer from one of the big retailers could ring France and get 10,000 boxes of apples at the end of the week, all looking the same and graded. And the French growers were the ex-Algerian orange growers who de Gaulle had got over to France. They were very good at cooperation. They got brand new orchards, and the Golden Delicious could make more money just going into what we had then was intervention. So they were out to do it, but we had to give evidence in Westminster that the French were cheating. And nobody else agreed with us. They said, oh no, etc., like that. So our challenge, they gave us 3 weeks to come back with evidence that the French were going against the Treaty of Rome. And that's where we called in a lot of help and came back and presented where they were cheating, which was the money they were getting for their promotions.
Okay. And having presented that evidence, did the UK government at that time manage to influence the retailers to then stop buying or buy more limited product from the French?
No, our engagement really was with the consumer. We got the British consumer on our side, and that's what farming still has to do. It's the consumer who put the pressure on the retailers. And we started two schemes. One was because the French weren't taking our lamb. That was another thing that helped us. And we took a fresh lamb to the French embassy and Harrods, and we did a lot of media things that had a very good sort of focus on it. But we started two schemes. One was retail surveillance, and everybody wrote to us who wanted to support British apple growers. There's something about apples and the English. And so we set out a cards, and we had people all over the country filling in postcards, prepaid, pre-done by a sponsor, and telling us what the state of English apples were in the shop. And then we went to the big retailers and hit them over the head if they were bad and praised them if they were good. So it was the consumer power that helped us. And the fact we were women were good because if you think about it, at that time, 1980s, well, a bit earlier than that, 79 we started, so 1980s, the image of a farmer's wife wasn't necessarily the image that we portrayed. So, but we had help. We had tremendous support behind the scenes, and the Earl of Selborne was producing a report for the growers, and he invited Margaret and I to go around the country with him to talk to growers. So that gave us a platform because we had no money. No money at all. So we just relied on people to help us. So by going around the country, we could set up different branches and groups, and people got together. But it was really, you know, we weren't going to be beaten.
What a military operation. What are the learnings that you learned from the 70s, 80s in the respect of winning that campaign that we can learn today as we go through the ongoing issues within the top fruit sector? Teresa, what can we learn from back then to implement today, please?
Well, I think it's the engagement with the consumer, but the thing is, it's no good saying to the consumer, just buy British. What we've got to do is give them a message of why it's in their interest to buy British. So we said to them very, very clearly, if it goes on like this, you, the consumer, will lose your chance to buy British apples. Not whinging, but actually giving a direct thing. And that's the only bit that strikes a chord with the consumer. And of course, there was no social media in those days. So it's more difficult, but we could control it more.
Okay, and the likes of the British Apple groups on Facebook, I'm amazed at how much attraction they get. But do you think that today the British consumer is very, very fickle in that they have less of an understanding of UK farming, UK horticulture? We're all decked out with clothing from all around the world. All my IT kit is all from around the world. Do you think the UK consumer does care about buying UK produce, or perhaps doesn't care? What do you think?
Well, I think COVID has changed a lot of this, because I think what happened when people had lockdown, they suddenly bought a lot of produce locally, and they sourced locally,
Yep.
and and people went online with it. So I think it is, but it's a bit like buying free range eggs. If you stood outside the supermarket with a clipboard and you say to somebody, "Oh, do you buy free range eggs?" They'd say, "Oh yes, I'd never buy battery hens." Yeah. But it wasn't till we had an electronic card and a loyalty card that we actually knew what people bought. We knew what we sold. Yeah. So that's the technology. People might say what you want to hear, but not practice it, partly sometimes because their budget won't allow them to. Yeah. But I think there is a stronger awareness. It always used to be there in the older generation, but I think there's a stronger awareness of why people want to source from the UK, and people are waking up to maybe countries that we buy from don't have the sort of practices that we want. After all, if you buy a £2 t-shirt, what conditions it's going to be produced in? So I think people are thinking more, but it's not obvious.
Yeah, I like the comment, and I've forgotten his name. The CEO of the Compass Group was the City Food Lecture main speaker about three years ago, and he gave this vision of his granddaughter in 20-30 years time, that she would be on a treadmill in her gym in London, and she'd have a pair of glasses on, smart glasses, and while she was on the treadmill, she'd be able to select the meal that she wanted that night by swiping left or right with her eyes, and that she would be wanting to check the provenance of her food, that she would only be wanting to procure local English apples to have on her fruit salad. And I thought that was quite interesting then, that people, and especially on the back of COVID, people want to eat more fresh produce, and they do want to find product that is more local to them because of food. So there does seem to be an understanding of that. But then, as you say, Teresa, there are some families who, especially with food inflation that we got at the moment, they're just buying the cheapest food. So I suppose it comes back down to that retail pressure, and that's a nice segue to bring in with the success that you had with the Women's Farming Union. How did you then get into retail? What was the entry into retail, please?
Well, I'd been on the Apple and Pear Development Council as a member, and when I gave up chairing the Women's Farming Union in 1986, yes, I needed a job because my husband and I had just bought our bit of the family farm at 17% interest. Oh. I know. So, when I say that to young farmers now, I say, you don't know. And so I needed to get another job so we had an income for the farm. And one of the members of the Apple and Pear Development Council knew somebody in a big PR company in London. And he suggested I went to talk to them so I could talk to them about the consumer and issues. So I got a job with them. And for once, I had a red BMW and a salary, which was quite an exciting thing in our household, I have to tell you. And then I got headhunted from there 5 years later. I'm a kind of 5-year person, to join Safeway, and I met the then chairman, chief executive, Alistair Grant, who was just unique in terms of helping the industry. And he said, "Oh, your name came up a year ago, but I thought you were too busy farming." So I went into a job with a blank sheet of paper, and we were the minnow. I mean, Sainsbury's, Tesco's, much bigger than us. So it was a fabulous opportunity to just get on with it. I'm not very good at corporate politics, so I just sat down and we went out with this famous Strathclyde project, which had been started, but the chairman said to me, "This is a really up your street, Teresa." And we'd looked at the 6 areas where we were importing products like bacon, vegetables, fruit, soft fruit, and saying, why were we doing it? Was it the buyer, or was it that the grower couldn't supply it? And we used the University of Strathclyde to do all the big paperwork. So the groups were set up, and I had to sort of go around and manage with another director from Safeway. And that was amazing because people started to talk together about what the differences were. They couldn't talk price. Even then, they could never talk price. Yeah. But out of it came some of the groups did better than others. Out of it came the soft fruit produce promotion. They set up summer fruits from that because they'd sat down. And so in a way, it's about communication and cooperation. Meat industry didn't benefit from it. But the other thing that
Okay.
started with the vegetables was we started the children's bit of getting the children to eat more fruit and veg, which has now been taken up by the Food Foundation. They're doing a brilliant job on it.
Yeah, with VegPad, and
Yes.
VegPad just gained more sponsorship, and they've got another £5 million TV campaign that they've managed to blag for free because of the great team there and what they've been able to create. So that's great news.
But this was incentive. Sorry, Karen.
Go on, Teresa.
No, this was incentive, and this was the whole idea. In fact, it came out of some research Birdseye had done, to give the children had some incentive to eat more fresh fruit and vegetables in the schools. So even if you weren't good at games, even if you were overweight, you could still get the T-shirt by eating the cherry tomatoes or something. So it was done on a psychological thing. And that's the trouble with farming. Sometimes we're too traditional. This was looking at it back to front. So it was we did it from the psychological department of Bangor University. What were the triggers to get people doing it?
Got it. So what would be your advice today? We talked about the likes of social media. I am of a view when I'm a bit cynical and when the weather's a bit grey, and I've got clients bemoaning to me the fact that they're not getting the margin that they think they require from the retailers to be able to invest, and especially even more so with the price inflation that's going on. To me, there's a number of large global food companies out there who perhaps could do good but don't want to because they're just chasing the pound. How can we influence the consumer, the UK consumer, the international consumer, to eat more fresh produce, to eat more healthily, rather than perhaps being succumbed by these high sugar, high fat foods? And Teresa says even more so with the report that our current Prime Minister is not looking to add any taxes on high salt, high fat foods. How can we influence the consumer to eat better, do you think?
Well, I think people are much more concerned about their health now than they ever were. It might have been COVID, it might be something else. And we're beginning to see what the impact is, particularly, if you're young and you're overweight, how do you actually get round to it? So there are some programs going to eat more fruit and vegetables. And two things are happening. One, which started in America under Wholesome Wave, where the doctors prescribe a prescription and people can go to the market and get their fresh fruit and vegetables. And the Alexander Rose charity here is doing it. I went to see it in Brixton. So there are things that are actually happening. And I think the bigger thing that's going to happen to a lot of people is this urban farming that's developing. So where you've got people, I saw the Marks and Spencers in Oxford Street. When you go downstairs, you open the glass cabinet and cut your salad. Okay, not everybody shops in Marks and Spencer's food department, but I think food is coming to the town and growing is coming to the town. And I think people are starting to realise the consumer will never buy anything unless they see how it affects them and their family. What do they, and they trust the people. You might have masses of social media and masses of followers for the young, but actually, if you listen to your friend who tells you what to do. I'll just give you an example. When we were at Safeway, McKinsey came in and they said, I had taken the company to environmentally friendly. In other words, we were ahead of our time. But what we found was people shopped with Safeway till they got married. And then they went to Sainsbury's because their mother and grandmother had shopped at Sainsbury's when they were married. Do you see? So you can see the psychology. We, as an industry, we need to think, what are the triggers? And I think the Food Foundation with Veg Power have got it. I think there are lots of initiatives. The trouble is that they're all over the place. We need to pull them more together. Yes,
and I love that thought about getting that collaboration, especially parents. There's a marketing term, why care and share. So if you've got two parents in a school playground stating, oh, have you seen the Veg Power campaign? I'm going to do a tray bake for my kids. What's the Veg Power campaign? Oh, you must go have a look at it. It's got lots of interesting, and then that opens up into the whole educational piece that we've interviewed, and I've forgotten her name, but an amazing chef who went into a school kitchen and look to get the kids to be totally in union with fresh food and to prep the food themselves. And they've now got to the point where the food foraging, when they can during the summer, to bring the food back into the school kitchen to cook. So there's that whole educational piece, just not with the kids though, is it? It's also with teachers and the schools themselves that why should the schools be just having the cheap option of dealing with a monosyllabic food company when they could actually put so much passion in and get the school and the cooking element within the school as one, because if the kids get it, especially at a young age, they'll then start cooking for themselves ongoing.
You're absolutely right. And when we went to Brixton to look at them about getting the children to eat more fruit and veg, the headmaster said to us, oh, I was very reluctant to do this because he said, I didn't think it would work. And then he said, it's been fantastic because the teachers have got behind it. So we've done it in geography. It's spread throughout the whole school. And he said, actually, truancy is down. More children are coming into school. So it's this sort of impact. But I think there's some people who've done fantastic work on school meals. And I know Sheila Dillon from the food programme has sort of given prizes to these people, but they're working in little pockets. You get a passionate person there. And it's sort of, how do you bring it all together so you can learn from the people? How did they do it? How did they balance the budget? Because the budget is not great, but they managed to do it. If you've got somebody who's passionate locally, get them interested in the food.
Yeah. So they're having a penalty tax. So the National Food Strategy by Mr. Dibbleby has intimated that there should be a tax on high sugar, high salt fats, and that doesn't look like it's going to happen because Boris doesn't want to upset those big food companies. But just learning from you, Teresa, going back to what you've said that if we can influence the consumer, the kids, the schools, to actually get those kids and the schools to start cooking with more fresh food, that's going to be a benefit for them on a health basis, and also for our sectors as a whole, because more fresh produce will be sold. But as you say, it's a bubble. So how can we find a solution to, instead of it being a bubble, to be, because in other countries, whether it be the likes of Sweden or even France to an extent, they don't have these sort of issues that we have in the UK. So what's the magic wand that we can break down those bubbles and make it countrywide for the likes of schools to feed our children properly? What's the answer?
Well, I think with the big companies, they are actually remodulating their products, because whether Boris puts a tax on or not, it takes a long time to take out some of the sugar, not to affect the taste. So it'll take them a year or two. And a lot of them have already gone down that track. So I think that's what's happening. But I think at the end of the day, if you go into the schools, the trouble for poor parents now, probably both are working, but they're the consumer of the school, and they're the people who can put pressure on the school. Okay. So with them, on that aspect, are you positive about the future for our general health in respect of us eating more fresh produce, or do you think we're on a downward curve? No, I think two things are happening, but it won't happen overnight. I think people have got more interested in growing their own food, even if they just have a balcony or things like that. And once they've grown some carrots or tomatoes and their children have grown some seeds, they start to view it in a different way. And that's the difficulty. We talk forever about, people shop in supermarkets but don't realize it comes from the earth. But I think there's a changing thing, and people can do it. Social media is a big power. The cookery programs, they don't do enough on farms. The person who's done the most for farming is Jeremy Clarkson. And you look at that and you thought, would you ever have done a farming program with Jeremy Clarkson? And people have got to realize they've got to think outside the box and do something that would probably be completely opposite. And that leads to all sorts of change of behavior. It does,
doesn't it? So you're happy that the future is bright. We can't stop. We've got to just keep going. And if there's going to be a positive out of the last couple of years, people want to eat more fresh food. So if we can educate them in novel means, whether that be the likes of Veg Power or Jeremy Clarkson, and we just keep banging that drum, we should be in a better place.
Well, I think what's happening is now we haven't got the common market, the guaranteed subsidy. When we went in 79, we went for capital grants rather than getting cheap credit. The French went for cheap credit. Yeah. So we were led along a path of, if you do this, you'll get this amount of money. The next generation of growers are not interested in subsidy. What they don't want is regulation, but they're the ones who are coming up with the innovative ideas. Yeah. whether it's an app to show you back to the farm. And on farming themselves, they're looking at what can they produce. I mean, we're producing hemp now, we're producing all sorts of things. And the big thing now is either vertical farming or insect farming. And insect farming in Canada has the biggest insect farms, and they're feeding the protein that's been fed to fish and chicken, and eventually we will be getting our protein from things like that. So there's lots of opportunities out there, but we've got to get over the British farmers' reluctance to cooperate, because if you're going to create volume, you've got to franchise something. You've got to get some sort of franchise that you can all work together owning the share, and that's the only way to get a bigger share of the market.
Yeah, well done. And I'm going to pull a quote out from the City Food Lecture again. And again, I've forgotten the chap's name, but they 4 or 5 years ago, they had the VP of PepsiCo as the main speaker. And after he said his bit, Chris White, editor at Eurofruit magazine and FPJ, asked the question, so when are you going to start investing in bananas? When is PepsiCo going to get involved in the fresh produce trade? And this VP of PepsiCo just spun it straight back to Chris and said, when you show me how to make money out of bananas, we'll get involved. And again, just let me have a bit of a ramble on this one. So at the moment, from what I can see, the government is so busy with other things, is fairly ineffective in trying to guide the UK populace to have a healthy understanding of where food is coming from. Even though Boris Johnson, after he had COVID, stated, we're a nation of fatties, I'm going to do my utmost to try and better this. We're being a burden on the NHS. We've got to eat better. So there is that positive pressure from government, but government's so busy and perhaps they're not the best people to do it. We've then got the food companies who are constantly now telling us about their sustainability goals and how they want to have carbon neutrality, but they're still producing food that is high in sugar, high in tax. Perhaps they want to do good and they'll realize, a bit like the tobacco industry, that filling our kids full of fatty foods and high sugar, high salt foods isn't doing good, and they'll have to actually sacrifice some shareholder value and start getting involved in areas such as fresh food that will do good. Because you and I spent too much time in front of fresh produce companies who are doing good but aren't making the margin to be able to create marketing campaigns to get anywhere near the likes of a branded crisp or a sugary drink. And there seems to be that again, I use that tobacco example, that these branded foods that aren't doing good for our kids can make so much margin that they can sponsor Formula One cars and they can sponsor sports people, whilst the Apple industry can't, because they can't have the margin. I just hope, Teresa, that those food companies realize that they could, with a little turn of the oil tanker of a food machine, that they could get more involved in our food sector and do good. Am I dreaming?
No, you're not dreaming, but I think there's another element to this as well, is how we actually sell our fresh produce. Fresh produce is always the first aisle because people know it's attractive. But actually, I went to look in Whole Foods. I did a big American tour when I was at Safeway, and they had whole tables piled up with mushrooms and things like that. And you actually felt, oh, I want to buy this stuff. Everything otherwise is all wrapped, packaged, and things like that. So I think that the industry itself should challenge the retailers, because the margins in retailers on fresh produce is good. That, the margins vary across the side, and I think they should challenge the retailers to sell it better way that makes it more attractive to people, but doesn't compromise food safety. Food safety was the biggest problem, That's why salad bars went. But it's not really attractive to buy. You're buying this because it's on your list, but you don't go in there and say, wow, when I went to Whole Foods in America, open till 10 o'clock at night, and these piles of this abundant stuff, and you thought, wow. So I think we've got to get the wow factor back into selling. It's good to have a British sticker on it, but I'm not sure the other thing that happens with fresh produce is you buy plums or you buy peaches or you buy nectarines, they're underripe and they go bad at home. There's a huge opportunity for somebody. They started selling flowers that smelt and that charged more. I asked my traders in Covent Garden, because they supply the restaurants, I said, how do you manage to get produce to the chefs that's ripe and ready to eat? if they can do it, then the retailers should start thinking about it. But they're thinking about waste, they're thinking about things like that. But that's what makes more waste in the consumer's home.
Yeah, yeah. And do you think brand? Do you think all fresh producers have a brand? Because there's so many companies in the UK, and even more so in the likes of the States, thinking that the route to success is to have a brand, and then we can compete head to head with an energy drink or a packet of crisps. Do you think branding's a way to go?
Yes, but I don't think we understand brand in this country. I mean, the red tractor is not a brand. They keep telling me it is, but it isn't. A brand has to have values. It has to have something, the reason that you want to buy it at the end of the day. And I don't think we've ever really captured that. But if you walk around a supermarket, and I used to take farmers around it, if you look at some of the ready meals now, you've got one with Charlie Bingham's meals, yep. And Charlie's matching the advertising. You look at Fever Tree, yep. How have they grown that market? That is an expensive product because it's gone for the premium market, but it's got a story behind it. People know they're buying something else like that. And we failed to do that. We failed it with apples. We had fantastic advertising for apples, which we weren't allowed to use when we had the APDC, which was paid for by a levy for growers, which is not great news. So we need to make it more attractive. We need to make people understand. And with what they're going to do is more now. You talked about the daughter, ordering her thing on her bicycle. Have the QR code, and you can go back to the farm where it's produced. They did that in Sweden 8 years ago on a yogurt and a meatball, and then it sort of faded out. But if people really want to know, then they can look at it. There's lots of opportunities.
And Teresa, I've just had a WhatsApp remind me, say, Max, talk to Teresa about taste of fresh produce. And I always go back to my example of Richard Diplock, who's the MD of a great tomato business with multiple sites in the UK. And when I interviewed him last year, he said, we're not really after a brand. What we want people to do is to taste our tomatoes, our British tomatoes, because once they've tasted them, they'll never go back. So my example, I bought some tomatoes with my 13-year-old boy, split them in half, and had to sort of force them in him. Every time we go shopping, he's now buying tomatoes because of that taste. So I think and exactly the same as we know with British apples. If you can get a segment, a slice of British apples, and so I'm going to be a bit rude, in a kid's gob, and they enjoy it because of that taste. And we all know what a fresh piece of British apple is like. You've then got them. So we need to also remember, Teresa, as per my contact WhatsApping me, we've got to remember that taste element as well as the visual look, because if we can get them on taste, we've got them for life.
You're absolutely right. And this is where we got caught by the New Zealanders who developed the Braeburn apple. And what they did was they sat down and they said, what does the consumer want in an apple? And Braeburn came up. We were doing what rootstock should we have it on? Well, how should we do it like that? So it simply goes back to this message. What does the consumer want? What's it in for them? And of course, we're now growing Braeburn here, but it goes back, you're talking about taste, then it goes back to being ripe. You've got to have fruit that's ripe, and you've got to tell people it's right and ready to eat. I mean, even if you buy ripe avocados, ripe and ready to eat, I'm sorry, but it takes a couple of days.
They're like hand grenades. They're just
absolutely.
But you buy them to consume there and then, and not to fight it and cut your hand open.
But you could increase the sales if you increased the ripeness, and as you say, then the taste would come, provided you got the right variety. And people say that was delicious. I mean, we used to grow masses of Ulan plums. We had a lot of soft fruit here, and they were to die for. Absolutely to die for. I've had to plant them now in my garden. You can't buy them anywhere.
So come on, with your farming background, your retail background, and let's call it your advisory background, that there's so much intellectual horsepower within you. What's your advice to the sector, to individual growers or growing groups, or companies, as to how we can prosper the fresh produce sector in the UK? What's your advice? What would you like us to do over the next 5-10 years to make this sector even more successful?
Well, I think they started when we were doing the Women's Farming Union and when I was doing Strathclyde. Our window of growing was very, very short. So if you take raspberries or strawberries, you can now get strawberries from April round till October because of the different methods. But they've got to be something that people enjoy getting them. It's no good picking strawberries with a great big white tip on them. So they've got to understand and have pride in their products. And I think the industry needs to cooperate more still. We've got too many people in silos, I mean, particularly in the horticultural sector. And quite frankly, having sat on all these boards, what are they delivering? And Henry's done this wonderful food strategy, great papers, but where's the action? I mean, the MAF and DEFRA are dotted with libraries of, Curry Commission, all these things like that. And they come up with these great ideas, but then where do they go to? And that's why I was so pleased with the soft fruit people. I mean, I'll give you an example. I chaired the London Tourist Board during 9/11 and foot and mouth. And I had hotels there with floors that were shut because the Americans weren't coming. And we'd got ourselves in London so dependent on our North American market that when we had this disc of Tony Blair in a white suit, burning cows, the Hatfield train crash and floods. So people used to ring from America saying, is it safe to come to England? Do I have to bring my own food? We didn't understand where it was. So from that, luckily enough, Colin Marshall was at British Airways and he got us 40 million from Tony Blair to regroup the American trade people and to get people to think about what we could offer here. And farming's a bit like that. You've got to understand what it is that people want. And COVID has had a huge impact, which we haven't measured yet because more people have been working from home. So of course you saw all the online increasing. Now online's great, but fresh produce, people actually want to choose themselves.
Yeah, well said. Well said. So do you think that we've got to see more collaboration within the sector, less talk and more action, and especially on the back of COVID? The talking shops. I remember an ex-boss of mine when he got invited to get involved with a panel about some food technical element of he declined because he just deemed it as a talking shop. And just like you intimated that he saw so many files of reports just being locked away, nothing being actioned, and there's a whole industry behind that. So we need more direct action, just like you created with the Women's Farming Union on the apple side. We need to see more direct action, more collaboration within UK horticulture to the consumer and to our educationalists to raise our profile and to get people to eat more fresh produce.
Well, I think also we need to invest in R&D, and this is what we're doing. And it's interesting to see at East Malling, the research station has now linked up, and they're doing some fantastic things. But what people forget, East Malling is we grew all the strawberries that are now planted in America and things like that. If we'd had like Tetra Pak, a sort of a P for every patent we'd done, our budget for R&D would be amazing. So things are coming, but I'm not sure how close the link is with the consumer and our R&D. We need to think, we need to start from the beginning. Who am I trying to sell to, and what is it they want?
Okay, and you mentioned the likes of vertical farming. So there's yet another business got yet another £100 million worth of investment last week. And that's new investment money coming in. But we've got this very established UK horticultural fresh produce sector, which, if anything, my view is if that investment came into that sector, more good could be done and more return would be created, rather than investing into a vertical farm, which today, especially with energy costs, perhaps is not the best investment to go in. On the basis that we need to collaborate as a sector, do we need to attract the Elon Musks, the Jeff Bezos into our sector, so that we can invest to prosper the sector as well? Do we need to have that collaboration with those sort of companies ongoing, do you think?
Yes, I think we need to have that sort of thinking at the end of the day. I mean, you need to have somebody who's not connected with the industry at all to really look and say, look, this is useful to do. I mean, as you say about city money is awash at the moment. A lot of it's going into vines, a lot of it's going into insect farming, but a lot of it is going into thinking ahead. I mean, Dyson is one of the biggest farmers in the country. He's got over 33,000 acres. But they have to learn. You have to deal with the weather, and we have to deal with the new technology, because one of the biggest problems for horticulture is labour. I mean, in my day, I had picking gangs for blackcurrant of 100 people who'd come out on the old London bus, sit on bushel boxes and milk, like you were milking, they'd milk the blackcurrant bushes. Well, now you have one machine, whiz, whiz, whiz. So labour is an important bit, because people see it, they don't see it as a sort of 12 months job or a career. So our biggest issue at the moment is labour in soft fruit and on top fruit.
Okay. And Teresa, just on that front, it's a very good segue, just as we're starting to wrap up and run out of time. Students, younger people, why should they get involved in the UK horticulture, UK fresh produce sector?
I think they should get involved because there's such a variety of jobs and talent that's needed. And it's not just picking apples off a tree, it's the technology, it's the science behind it, it's the nutrition. And we don't sell ourselves as an industry enough of the wide variety of jobs. I mean, we're not the only industry that says that. Catering says it, supermarkets say it too. But we need to get a much greater dialogue with the children when they're sort of 13, 14, not the university round, and start telling them what an exciting, interesting job outside, inside could be, to use their skills to develop. Yeah,
well said. And I've slightly led the witness in the respect of the last couple of years on a recruitment perspective. We've seen more and more younger individuals knocking on our door on a recruitment perspective to find out more about fresh produce and horticulture, because they could see that growing is doing good, especially on the whole sustainability message. And I call it the Goldman Sachs moment, that rather than being aligned to Goldman Sachs with a smart suit in an office in London and getting paid very, very well, you're not actually doing any good. To be involved with UK horticulture, where you meet the most, and Teresa, you know this more than I, you meet the most amazing people, and to be involved with, as per Teresa's background, some of the innovation that Teresa's seen ongoing, and you, this next generation, it's going to be even more fascinating. And Teresa, the bit that really excites me for this younger generation is on a global basis, that if you get into the sector, you can make friends and you can find connections, and you can find industries in South Africa, South America, Australia, North America. And it's, Teresa, it's an amazing family community, isn't it? Fresh produce. I've seen and been associated with other sectors, say like engineering, but I've just never seen that love and passion and community of fresh produce on a global basis.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think what is happening, again, go back to COVID, people are suddenly thinking, what am I doing with my life? Like that. And a lot of people are changing their things like that. Where we are a nation of gardeners. Probably the whole world, we're the ones who do more. People are starting to want to work outside. It's better for their health. They're enjoying it. You can actually take your kids to work sometimes. I won't go back to the old women farm for women who used to have all the prams lined up behind them in the picking shed. So it is an industry, but I think we need to refresh our thinking. And say to people why it's an attractive industry. And as you say, you can go to a British company here like Bartlett's, but you can also go and work in their things abroad. You can learn so much, and it's different talent is needed, different jobs.
Yeah, there's a lovely Moroccan family I know that grow amazing grapes, and above their kitchen door they have a sign saying that life begins at the end of your comfort zone. So for those younger individuals, we can't not mention the likes of the MDS scheme, Teresa, which is so good in the way of the placements that it offers, and also the likes of the washable company of fruiterers, farmers, and on all the courses that they run to really educate and inspire that generation ongoing. So Teresa, just as we wrap up, advice to your younger self. What would you say to your younger self?
I think to my younger self, I'd say if I was starting again, find a good mentor. And I think that people forget the value of mentors at the end of the day. They don't necessarily even be in the same industry, but if you have a good mentor who challenges you and it makes you think a bit at the end of the day. So that's what I would say. I've had people who've helped me and I realize now they were mentoring, but I hadn't thought about it at the time.
Yeah, well done. That's top advice. And final question, what is your favorite fresh produce, please?
What is my favorite fresh? Oh, English apples.
I love the hesitation.
Say anything else.
Banana, mango. No, English. We nearly lost it then, Teresa. No, she's off. She's recommended something else. That's brilliant. Excellent. So Teresa, we must just give a big up for the National Fruit Show. What's the timetable of events for this year, please?
Well, it's going to be around the 2nd of November, and we're going to get, last year was very successful. We got all sorts of people there, and I invited a lot of people from outside the industry, and that's what I'm going to do. It's my last year as president. So I'm getting people who might think they know a lot about the English apple industry and the English soft fruit industry, but just spending a day there, the 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people I brought who'd never have been to something like that before have raved about it. So, yeah. But it's up to all of us, you know. There's lots of enthusiasm in the industry.
Excellent. And that's what we need, Teresa. We need your fresh thinking, your innovative thinking, ongoing within the sector to get us out of these perceived silos, so that we can get the sector to push on forward with all of the headwind that we've now got with the consumer, especially looking to consume more of our fresh produce, our great UK fresh produce. Teresa, thank you very much for your time. You're a tour de force. You're brilliant, and we all look forward to coming down, especially to attend the National Fruit Show later in the year.
That would be lovely. We really welcome you. Great.
Excellent. And don't go out of the wind. It's still very windy out there, so let's stay inside. Excellent. Teresa, thank you very much. Thank you.